We've been in the midst of a conversation in Mark's Gospel for the last several weeks, and in particular, we had the experience with Jesus and the disciples. Let's talk a little more about them because it's been an interesting journey they've had the last few weeks. It also gets picked up in what's going on with our other readings as well. Let me first begin by saying I know it's summertime, which means I know some of you are out working in gardens, maybe going for walks in the woods or in the forest and all that, and you might encounter running into thorns every now and then, or maybe let's say a bunch of very uncooperative insects. You don't like those kind of stinging sensations you get. Paul's writing about thorns today, and I think all this kind of wraps in to where Paul's going with the thorns. Let's talk about this. Paul talks about his encounters with people. He's in a situation in Corinth where in the midst of his travels, there are many people who have heard his message and they take it to heart. There are others who have heard the message, they think they can do it better. And so they come in and they start preaching, say, where Paul is not located. And they don't always really are honorable to the word, let's say to the word of Jesus that's been passed along in a very oral tradition at this point. This is before any of the Gospels have been written. Paul's writings are that old. They're older than the Gospels. And so what's happening is that Paul has to go back and talk to these people all over again to kind of help them unlearn and unsee what they saw and heard from these other teachers along the way, because they're not really in the tradition of Jesus. Paul talks about this as if he has a thorn in his side. It causes him pain. Well, if we heard our first reading today from the prophet Ezekiel, Ezekiel's not talking about thorns, but he's talking about pain. He's talking about dealing with people he considers a rebellious lot, who apparently are getting to tear his hair out. It's interesting how that works out. You think about Jesus, you wonder, does he ever get frustrated dealing with the people and dealing with the disciples? You think, oh no, Jesus is perfect. Well, okay, but then again, Jesus is dealing with disciples we heard say in the gospel just a few weeks ago. They're riding in the boat going across the lake. There's a storm that arises. Jesus is resting in the boat. He's snoozing away. And the disciples are just losing their minds, thinking they're all going to drown. They yell, they scream, they wake Jesus up. Jesus calms the seas, and then he calms the disciples. And they get to the other, and he says to them, you have little faith. You have little faith. They get to the shore. That was last Sunday's gospel. And Jesus takes the disciples through this crowd of people, and they meet some people. Jesus meets people. Hopefully the disciples are watching and learning along the way. Jesus encounters this woman who has had medical problems. She has bleeding and hemorrhages. She reaches from the crowd just even to touch his garment as he walks by, believing, I have faith in this man. He will heal me. If only I could touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed. She does. She's healed. And you remember the conversation that Jesus and the woman have. Daughter, your faith has saved you. Jairus steps forward. Jairus is a synagogue official. Jairus' daughter is dying. She's gravely ill. He asked Jesus to come and to heal her. Now bear in mind, he didn't ask the rabbi from the synagogue to do this. He asked Jesus to do this. I can only imagine what kind of conversation he and the rabbi had a few days later. But all the same, he places his trust and faith in Jesus. Jesus heals his daughter. He brings her back to life. Hope the disciples are taking notes. We have all these stories about Jesus telling the disciples that he is disappointed, they lack faith. Then they meet these people who are filled with faith. Jesus now is in his hometown. They know him, but they don't. They seem too fixed on the idea that this man who is speaking with such wisdom and grace, how could this be? This is Mary's son. Mary's a humble woman. His father is Joseph, a carpenter. Carpenter's sons don't talk like this. Where did he get all this from anyway? So they did not have open hearts. They were very skeptical, and their flintiness pushed them away. What does Mark tell us in the gospel? He was amazed at their lack of faith. He could do nothing there apart from healing a few people by laying his hands on them. Wow. And now we know where that phrase, about not having honor except for those who know you well. Interesting how this all works out. Ezekiel, Jesus, They could have talked about having thorns in their side, but they did not. Paul talked about having a thorn, but he realizes that signs of weakness in his life are signs that the Lord has room to act in his life and to fill him up with good things. When I am weak, I am strong. Because in my weakness, I know I can acknowledge the Lord belongs in my life, and the Lord can change my life. We don't hear Ezekiel say, Lord, this rebellious people, they're your chosen people. Choose someone else. We don't hear that from Ezekiel. Jesus gets offshore with the 12 who don't believe. Father, thank you for the 12. Let's get another 12. We don't hear that. Instead, we experience, and then let's say we come to his hometown. Father, can I change my birth certificate? I don't want to be associated with these people anymore. We never hear these things because Jesus calls upon his Father to give him what he needs. Paul and Ezekiel are filled in the same way. Here we are 2,000 years later. In Ezekiel's case, 3,000 years later. We are filled with the Lord. We can do and go the Lord. We can go and do the Lord's bidding. We consider what it means when Jesus invites us to follow him. He will give us what we need. May we look to see how our signs of apparent emptiness, our signs of having nothing to offer, our signs of having a thorn in our side are not disqualifying signs of weakness. They are signs that we have room for the Lord to come in and fill us and shape us and form us, that we can be the men and women who go out into the world and be his people in the world.